What's up, guys? It's me, Pez Flurps, and today I'm filming this right after the other one, which was the unboxing of this guy. So if you think that this looks cool and you want to hear my thoughts on my first impressions, then the unboxing will be the video right before this one. This is the live Chion, but that is not the focus for this video. The focus for this video is, in fact, a different knife. A knife of the Squid variety. And a knife that has somewhat of a mixed opinion in the balisong community. And that is something by Squid Industries it's known as, goodness. What the? Why do I have another Chion blade in here? Oh, okay. It is known as oh my god, the Hydro. This is a pretty interesting anodization. I knew that it was going to be Blurple because Blurple is the guy I purchased it off of. It's his kryptonite. I mean, Blurple is often everybody's kryptonite, but first thing I notice, it's light. It feels very light in the hands. Let me look at it from the Chion's perspective. The Chion having smaller handles, they are even shorter than the Chion, ever so slightly. But I will say that the shortness of these handles wasn't as much of a problem as I anticipated. So in the hand, first thing I notice, these cutouts, actually a little bit on the sharp side. Doesn't seem like all of them are as sharp, but this particular one right here is kind of on the rougher side. Well, it seems like the smaller ones are, oddly enough, more chamfered, or maybe my fingers aren't getting in there as much. But the closed look of this thing is really cool. I think that this guy looks really nice. And there's the open. And you'll see, she's been tipped. But this is the Hydro. So if you haven't seen the Hydro before, I don't know who you are, but welcome to the balisong world. I think these are the G10 spacers, which I've heard are kind of like the best configuration because it's kind of like lacking tip weight. But what I'm feeling right now is that what I anticipated with this already was that the weight was going to feel similar to something like the Frank, because while the Frank is much lighter, the Frank has this similar balance profile where most of the weight is centered here, but there's still more material on the outsides. And the same thing goes for this. Most of the weight is about, man, this thing's kind of dirty. Ew. Most of the weight is centered about like here. And this tip just doesn't give it enough. I would have loved to see like a stronger tip, like a little bit more out here and maybe more tapered handles, because I feel like this whole pattern is interesting, but I guess it would be hard to incorporate this with a little bit more of a tapered look. But as you guys know, I love tapered handles, but I think the blade is just interesting. I said this about the blade before on comments, but I don't think I've talked about it in my own videos. Wow, that's like a surprisingly tight tune. But that is that I think that this blade looks weird. I don't know if you guys have said this too, or you think this, but this blade just is a little odd looking. I mean, I know people have said it's supposed to be emulated for like the Tachyon, but I think that I wish the width of the pivot area was slightly smaller. If this was thinner, it would make this look proportionally a lot thicker, a lot more even to this, because it kind of just like pinches down into one point, which is fine, but I don't think it's necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing to my eyes. Now, I don't think you can really reground this without creating a lot of problems to the structural integrity of the knife, but I have heard that you can reblade this with certain things. I don't know which things you could reblade it with, but that would be worth investigating in the future by chance. Or perhaps I should say. The first thing I do notice, though, is that the sound... Whoa. The sound is... interesting. But honestly, I don't know. The hydro is not really doing it for me right now. It feels fine, but it feels weird. Like there's not a lot that's like it. And it's getting that dead close. Sometimes it has a lively close. It's very quiet, very muted. But even with something like this, where the play is actually quite minimal, like that's not a lot of play, it still feels like it's kind of missing a little something. And you can see my fans here. Like when I try to do a fan switch, you see how that blade wants to go up? And that's because there's no tip weight. Which is kind of like the primary criticism people have made about this thing. I think the handles actually look quite nice in a vacuum. In a vacuum outside of these of this particular blade. I think the blade could look really cool. But it's just a little odd. Now, I've heard people say that you have to like spend some time to get used to the hydro because of its short length, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it's actually a decent flipper. Like it feels really good. And it doesn't feel like something you have to get like super used to. I think the only thing that sucks is that the fans are a little weird. But this is a position in which the shortness of the handles kind of serves to elevate the flipping experience, because when you have something that's a little bit of a weird fanner, if you fan too close to the top, it's a little more awkward to do. But if you fan closer to the bottom, where like the bottom of the handle like sits in your palm, you can get a much more even fan a little bit more consistently. And because it's a shorter balisong, you can kind of get it to your hand for your palm a little easier. So in this case, the height, the length of the handles is actually working in tandem with the specific design choices that were made. If you guys know of reblades that do work with the hydro, I'd love to give them a try, because I feel like the hydro is just one of those things that I love the look of it if it didn't have that blade, or if the blade was just a little different. I think a lot of people are hesitant about the hydro, specifically because of the look of the blade itself, because everything else is actually in a pretty good position. Now, I've flipped a Thai Kraken before. I used to own one. And with the Thai Kraken, the biggest issue was QC. Quality control just wasn't there. And you could make the argument that, I mean, I can't really give QC an evaluation in this one, because obviously this is either second or third hand, or even fourth, I don't know. Because you see a lot of hydros going. Like, people just grab them and sell them. And I can understand why, because it is a little odd of a flipper. It just feels different. And sometimes having different knives, you know, some people like that in their collection and some people do not, because sometimes it's nice to just sit down and flip and have your knives, while looking different and having slight differences, you don't want them to have too much of a difference, because then it's more of a task to get into them. And if you spend the time to get good at a particular balance that's really weird, then the other balance songs feel weird. Opus. But like, I think that that is another thing that holds back the hydro, but the sound is actually quite nice. I think if I had to compare this to the live Chion, personally, I prefer the Chion. It just feels a little bit more solid in the hands. It feels like it's got more going for it. And while it is kind of like a more blade bias with like a little bit too much tip weight, I would rather have something that has more tip weight than not enough, because you can always shave. You can always send it somewhere and they can take stuff down. You can't really get away with adding. And that's kind of this poor consequence that is the hydro. Because with the hydro, yeah, you can change the spacers. You can put the G10 ones in, which I've heard are the best, because they reduce the weight a little bit. which kind of helps to give a better balance because it accommodates for the lacking tip weight up here. I think a cool thing that they could have done, like I said before, is just increase the size towards the end again. Yes, it might have a hot spot, which would make it a little less consistent for flipping. And I know that Squid's whole thing is that they're supposed to be for like flipping performance, but honestly, I see a lot of good flippers that don't really flip this because of the length being a little weird. I will say that the Chaplains feel a little loose, not like the loosest, but a little on the loose side. And it just has this like dead-ish feeling while having like good tolerances, which is kind of paradoxical. You don't really expect that. I think the fact that I've gone 10 minutes rambling about this guy goes to show that this is a very complicated product. I would love to spend more time with it. Again, it is something that I would love to get a different blade on it, because I think the handles feel nice. I like the handles. They have a fair amount of grip for being, what is this? I guess just kind of like a raw titanium look, raw titanium feel, but the cutouts do provide something. But it's like comfortable in the hand, and the length doesn't really bother me. The issue is just that there isn't really anything that fits it. So yeah, if you know something that fits, please let me know and I'll consider giving it a go, because I feel like that's just what the Hydro needs. It's just a different blade. The blade just looks weird. But yeah, flipping it, wow, this thing actually does perform quite well. Like it does what I ask it, even if it is a little weird on the fans. Like, yeah, you can't fan for a super long time, but if you're just popping a quick one, like in a combo, it doesn't actually feel quite as bad as it might look. But you know, for somebody like me who does a lot of fans, you can kind of get it to go where it needs to, but yeah, it just has that, like when it gets a little away from you, I think that looks so bad. Like that, when it starts to like go in these weird angles, that is just a symptom of that blade. And it's a shame that that is the case, but also it's a shame that if I do change the blade, I lose the first production. So I lose the history that is this knife. And you know, I don't really care that much, to be honest. But it is neat to have a first production Squid item, because, you know, Squid is kind of like one of those foundational makers, one of the cornerstones of the Balisong community, for better or for worse. But you know, you can't deny that Squid Industries is kind of like one of the faces. You know, Squid is like the Apple of Balisong making. At least some would argue that. So yeah, that's the Squid Hydro. Overall, I would still stand by the point that I prefer the feel of the Chion, but it is what it is. So I'll catch you guys in the next video, and yeah, have a good rest of your day. Peace.